Hi, I'm Lisa Combs, and this week on Behavior Bites, we're going to be talking about the concept of rehearsal. So I want to ask you to reflect on things that you yourself are really proficient at, that you're really good at, and how did you get good at that? And whether it's playing baseball or softball or playing the piano or your technology skills, whatever it is that you are really good at, chances are the reason that you're good at it is partly maybe a natural proclivity for it, but much more reliant on how often you've rehearsed it. How much practice have you given that particular skill is what oftentimes really contributes to how proficient you are at something. And the same thing goes for our habits. The more that we rehearse our habits, which are just behaviors, right? Another word for behaviors. The more we rehearse a behavior, whether it's an academic behavior, a sports-related behavior, a communication behavior, the more we rehearse it, the more ingrained it becomes in us. It becomes muscle memory, right? So those of us who play the piano can play probably at age 55, I can sit down and play Heart and Soul from muscle memory, even though I haven't played it for a very long time, but it's very ingrained in me because I learned it and practiced it so much at the time that I learned it. So we become good at the things that we rehearse, and that applies to our behavior as well. So we as teachers, if we recognize how profound that is, what it will trigger us to do is be maybe more aware and more intentional about what opportunities we're setting up in our interactions, in our routines, in the way that we manage our classrooms. What opportunities are we setting up for our kids to rehearse the behaviors we want to see increasing? And just as importantly, what opportunities are we removing for kids to rehearse the behaviors that we don't want to see increasing, that we want to see decreasing? So a couple of examples that come to mind. One of them being power struggles. Oftentimes we'll have a student who is just very frustrating to us because they always have to have the last word, and they will argue whether the sky is blue or not. That's a very frequent behavioral concern that I hear. And yet when I observe in classrooms, oftentimes I will see that the response to a student being argumentative and needing to have the last word is that we as the adult try to have the last word back and engage in that power struggle. And I think sometimes our thought process is we don't want them to win at this negative behavior that they're practicing. But oftentimes what we're doing is providing this extended rehearsal time where kids get very, very good at engaging in power struggles and pulling adults into arguments with them. So we want to sometimes recognize that we have a role in how embedded some behaviors become through repeated rehearsal. Another example would be students who come to class without the appropriate supplies. And so they get in kind of the habit of succeeding at not getting a lot done at class because I forgot my textbook, I forgot my pen, I forgot my Chromebook, I forgot my iPad. And so what we need to do in those situations is recognize this student is getting really good at avoiding his work by forgetting key materials or equipment that he needs to do that. How can we remove the opportunity to rehearse that? And it might be by having an extra Chromebook on hand if you have that available, or it might be having an extra set of supplies available, pens, pencils, etc., that are available, or an extra textbook on hand for the student who forgot, so that it doesn't work for them, so they don't get the chance to rehearse that behavior that works for them. So give some time in the next week to think about, literally list out the behaviors that you want your students rehearsing, and ask yourself, how many times do I give the students chances to demonstrate their proficiency with that? How many times do I give them chances to intentionally work on practicing that skill? At the same time, I want you to make a list of all the behaviors that you do not want students rehearsing, and ask the hard question, how many opportunities am I giving students to rehearse that behavior over and over again in my classroom? And how am I going to remove some of those opportunities so that you're really getting kids who show up to practice the behaviors that you want them to develop, and that you're really removing or taking off the schedule rehearsals or practices in behaviors that you don't want to see them become really developed at. So one thing to keep in mind is that the longer someone has been practicing a behavior or rehearsing a behavior, the longer it's going to take to unlearn it. We are creatures of habit, and we develop those habits. So I mentioned in another session that I love coffee. I've been drinking coffee since I can remember. And if tomorrow I was to try to quit rehearsing the drinking of coffee every morning and replace it with drinking a glass of water, I absolutely could do that. I could set up opportunities to do that. I could remove the coffee maker from my house. I could quit buying coffee. I could throw away my filters. I could buy a water filtration system that made wonderful, delicious cold water to increase the chances that I will drink more water and not drink coffee. I can do all that. And yet it's going to take a while before I am really embedded in drinking water versus coffee if I still have the chance to drink coffee. So when I go by the drive-thru at McDonald's and I see coffee is available, even though I didn't have it at home, I'm going to be really tempted to drive through and get myself a coffee, because I've been practicing that behavior for so long. So just keep in mind that when you have students who have rehearsed a behavior for a very long time, you're going to have to be patient about teaching them to practice and replace that behavior with something else. So make your lists, set up your practices, remove the practices you don't want, and I hope it really makes a big difference in your classroom over time. Bye.